the most dysfunctional team in the NFL, period, full stop. And yet people think that they're going to be the team that can take a late round pick and develop him. They can buck the odds and do something that very few other teams can do. No, they have to be handed a pretty close to finished product to have any chance at success. And that is not.
I love Jason. I disagree firmly because I think we've lost our minds. And I'll say it to him to his face, and I've told him on the phone, and I'll tell him on the air again. I don't want to step in it, but I firmly disagree with Jason last week. I'm like, you want him cut. Why do you want him cut? You want him cut because you're tired of seeing people say nasty things to you on the internet? Do you want him cut because it's hard to cover him? Do you want him cut because when you say you don't think he's a good quarterback, that he's got a big fan base and they go after you for it? Is that why you want him cut? Because wanting a guy cut from a team is a very strong thing.
Ken Carman is going all the way in on Jason Lloyd, and this situation has officially exploded into one of the most intense and uncomfortable debates in Cleveland sports media right now. This is no quiet disagreement or subtle back and forth either. Carman is standing on business, unloading everything he's got.
Browns are the most dysfunctional team in the NFL, period, full stop.
And making it crystal clear that he believes Jason Lloyd crossed a serious line with his recent remarks about Shedeur Sanders. And let's be clear about what set this off, because context matters here. Lloyd didn't just question Shedeur's long-term upside or debate his ceiling as a quarterback. He flat out suggested that the Browns should cut him. That's not normal sports talk. That's not casual radio banter. That's a nuclear-level statement in NFL circles, and Ken Carman wasted no time calling it exactly what it was. Reckless, irresponsible, and wildly out of bounds.
To him to his face, and I've told him on the phone, and I'll tell him on the air again.
This isn't just two media guys disagreeing on football philosophy. This has turned into a full-blown confrontation that has Browns fans glued to their phones, group chats blowing up, and Cleveland radio buzzing nonstop. Carman made it painfully obvious that in his eyes, Jason Lloyd didn't just make a bad take. He made a huge mistake. Asking for a player to be cut isn't analysis. That's you declaring publicly that a player has zero value to the organization whatsoever.
Make tight window throws. He doesn't throw guys open. This is...
And Carman's frustration was loud and clear. You could hear it in his voice. The disappointment, the disbelief, the anger. He broke it down piece by piece, explaining why Lloyd's approach was so damaging, not just to Shedeur Sanders, but to the credibility of the media coverage itself. Carman flat out said he does not like what Jason Lloyd is doing, and he wasn't trying to soften it or walk it back.
That if you want him cut from the team, it should be because he's a detriment to the actual team. Now, I don't know all the story. Maybe we'll find out that he's a terrible teammate. I don't think we will. But if you found out a guy was a terrible teammate and not that good, that's a reason to cut the guy. Just because we're bickering amongst each other about a quarterback doesn't...
Now here's where the situation starts boiling over even more. The Jason Lloyd drama is escalating fast, and it's not just Ken Carman pushing back. Other media members, analysts, and fans have started calling it out too. Social media caught fire, radio segments went viral, and suddenly Lloyd's words were being replayed, dissected, and criticized from every angle. But to really understand why this hit such a nerve, you have to rewind and look at how this all started.
I thought it was insane. Insane. I told you guys a million times.
Because this didn't come out of thin air. It began with one bold declaration from Jason Lloyd claiming that Shedeur Sanders is not the answer at quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. And again, this wasn't framed as a debate or a wait-and-see situation. Lloyd was firm, loud, and completely convinced that Shedeur could not succeed in Cleveland. And the way he delivered that message, Browns fans noticed immediately. It didn't feel balanced. It didn't feel fair. It didn't sound like constructive criticism meant to help the conversation. It came off personal, dismissive, and loaded with frustration. Fans picked up on that tone instantly, and it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Things escalated even more during the middle of the season. Shedeur Sanders had one rough outing. Not great, not terrible, just a normal young quarterback struggle.
By drop back per EPA, he's worse than Jamarcus
Okay,
Russell.
explain that. I know we've talked about it before.
It
but
takes
for those
into
that might not know
account
that
down and
number.
distance, field position, home or away, time and score. It is the most all-encompassing metric that you can use to measure a quarterback. It takes into account.
But Jason Lloyd didn't hesitate for a second. He jumped all over that game like it was the smoking gun he'd been waiting for. He treated that one performance as proof that he had been right all along, using it to validate an opinion he already held. But here's the twist Lloyd probably didn't expect. Shedeur Sanders responded the only way quarterbacks can, on the field. He came back and delivered a statement performance. Calm, confident, sharp reads, strong throws, command of the offense, the whole package. It wasn't just solid football. It was the kind of performance that shuts people up fast. For for a critic who had been so loud and so certain, that had to sting. Lloyd was forced to eat his words, whether he wanted to admit it or not. And most people thought, logically, that would be the moment to reset, reevaluate, maybe soften the stance, maybe acknowledge that the original take was too harsh, but that's not what happened at all.
He still doesn't know what he's looking at. He still doesn't flip protections. He doesn't know when he's hot. This isn't me saying this. I'm not an NFL. I've never claimed to be an NFL coach. This is people in that building will tell me he still doesn't know how to flip protections. He doesn't know when he's hot. He doesn't know what he's looking at. He can only throw to wide open receivers. He doesn't make tight window throws. He doesn't throw guys open. This is not the answer. These last 2 weeks were the opportunity coming off the Titans game to show that he can be the guy against playoff contenders, and he has not lived up to it. This is not.
As the season wrapped up, Jason Lloyd went right back to the negativity. And this is the key point Ken Carman and others have emphasized loudly. The renewed criticism wasn't about performance. Shedeur Sanders had actually been decent in the opportunities he was given. He showed growth, flashes, and progress. That's why this situation blew up the way it did. Because to a lot of people, this stopped being about football a long time ago. And when media criticism drifts away from facts and performance, fans are going to push back hard, especially when it feels like someone is rooting against a young quarterback instead of evaluating him fairly. He showed real growth, real resilience, and a clear ability to compete at a high NFL level, and that wasn't just opinion. The numbers backed it up too. The statistics supported the eye test, and most objective observers could clearly see that Shedeur Sanders was developing into a legitimate quarterback with upside. So once that reality set in, the obvious question became impossible to ignore.
Know what he's looking at. He still doesn't flip protections. He doesn't know when he's hot. This isn't me saying this. I'm not an NFL. I've never claimed to be an NFL coach. This is people in that building will tell me he still doesn't know how to flip protections. He doesn't know when he's hot. He doesn't.
If it wasn't about the play, then what exactly was Jason Lloyd criticizing? That's when things took a sharp turn. Lloyd shifted away from football substance and started calling out Shedeur for his positioning, his throws, and unbelievably, even his posture. Yes, posture. Let that sink in for a moment. We went from breaking down reads and mechanics to critiquing how a quarterback stands in the pocket. At that point, many fans felt the analysis had officially crossed the line. From there, it only got worse. Lloyd began nitpicking every single detail, searching for anything at all, that could be used to justify his already made-up conclusion that Sanders wasn't the answer. What started as football talk quickly spiraled into what many people viewed as a personal vendetta against a young quarterback who was simply trying to find his footing in the league and improve week by week. The Browns fan base noticed immediately, and they did not stay quiet.
Go watch what Kenny Pickett did the other week. He threw for like 5 yards. They told us he was the best option. Keep looking. Jackson Dart, I think he threw for like 32 yards yesterday. Like, maybe that was earth-shattering. Go look at Cam Ward and what his numbers are. His numbers have not been great the entire.
Fans came after Jason Lloyd hard, and the reaction online was relentless. Social media turned brutal fast. Timelines flooded with criticism, and message boards lit up nonstop. Browns fans called out what they saw as bias, unfair targeting, and an unhealthy level of negativity aimed at a player who hadn't done anything to earn that kind of treatment. Cleveland fans are passionate. Everyone knows that. And when they believe one of their players is being treated unfairly, they go into full defense mode. They make their voices heard loudly and unapologetically. And this time was no different. Lloyd's comments didn't just spark disagreement, they ignited backlash. Ken Carman was watching all of this unfold closely, and after taking it all in, he came to some serious conclusions about what was really driving Lloyd's behavior. Carman didn't dance around it either.
We be watching people all the time. I just watched the game Jackson Dart play, one of the worst games I've ever seen.
But gee, I don't understand what Jackson Dart has to do with anything.
But
we're not discussing whether Jackson Dart should be the starting quarterback.
No. What I'm saying to you is, I'm not talking about discussing. We look at EPA stats and numbers in a vacuum, and when I go down here and I look and I'm breaking it down.
He stated plainly that Lloyd's call for the Browns to cut Shedeur Sanders wasn't about football. It was about reaction. According to Carman, every time Lloyd says something negative about Shedeur, the Sanders fan base pushes back aggressively. And instead of reassessing, Lloyd responds by doubling down. Criticism turns into provocation, and provocation turns into extreme takes. It's a cycle that keeps escalating, and Carman made it clear he sees it for exactly what it is. Carman also acknowledged something else that added fuel to the fire. That Lloyd personally does not like Shedeur Sanders. That admission changes everything. Because once personal feelings enter the picture, objectivity goes right out the window. But here's where Ken Carman truly hammered his point home, and this is the core of his argument. Just because Jason Lloyd doesn't like Shedeur Sanders, and just because he gets heat from the fan base, that does not give him the right to call for the Browns to get rid of him. Why? Because, as Carman put it perfectly, this is not Jason Lloyd's team. These are the fans' Browns. This is Cleveland's team. Lloyd covers the team, but he doesn't own it. He doesn't run it. And he absolutely does not get to demand roster decisions based on personal frustration. Carman made one thing crystal clear. There is only one legitimate reason to ever call for a player like Shedeur Sanders to be cut, and that reason has nothing to do with posture, tone, or fan backlash. If Shedeur were a bad teammate, if he caused locker room issues, if he disrupted chemistry, acted selfishly, or created division among players, then you could have that conversation. That would be valid.
Was he could not play in structure, and he was a one-throw type guy, boom or bust deep, right? But guess what? He shows you on film. The next week, he's able to come out here and throw the ball on time. The next week, we talk about running backwards. The next week, he shows he can step up in the pocket. Cosell talked about it. There's multiple. I'm not the only one to say it. Chase Daniels talks about it. Multiple quarterbacks talk about the progression. So my thing is, we can sit here and bring up a number that we looked up and said, hey, he's the worst quarterback of all time. But if you watching the game, nobody that plays the game of football, watch the game of football, or all the people that talk about it is not going to say that Shedeur Sanders is the worst quarterback they've ever seen.
Well,
That's
what's your
patently
favorite
false.
quarterback? I think we've talked.
But here's the reality that anyone who knows Shedeur Sanders understands. He is not that kind of player. Never has been, never will be. He's known for work ethic, leadership, and respect in the locker room. By all credible accounts, Shedeur Sanders is exactly what teams want in a young quarterback. He's a consummate professional, a tireless worker, a true team-first guy, and someone his teammates genuinely respect and rally around. Coaches trust him, players back him, and nothing about his behavior has ever suggested selfishness or disruption. That matters a lot, especially at the quarterback position. So let's slow this down and ask the obvious question that Ken Carman keeps circling back to. If Shedeur isn't a bad teammate, if he's performed decently when given real opportunities, and if he's clearly shown the potential to grow into a quality NFL quarterback, then why in the world would the Browns cut him? That question doesn't come from emotion. It comes from logic, and that leads directly to the bigger issue. Why is Jason Lloyd even calling for something that extreme? What's the actual football-based justification here? Because once you strip away the frustration, the tone, and the constant back and forth with the fan base, there really isn't one. That's exactly what Ken Carman is calling out. Carman is essentially saying that Lloyd has allowed his personal feelings and emotional reactions to replace what should be objective football analysis. Instead of breaking down scheme fit, development curve, or situational performance, the conversation drifted into something much messier. And that's where the credibility starts to crack. Ken Carman didn't hedge his words either. He declared, flat out, that Jason Lloyd said a terrible thing. Not controversial, terrible. And that's an important distinction. This wasn't just a disagreement over talent evaluation or long-term upside. Carman made it clear that Lloyd crossed a line, went too far, and made comments that were inappropriate and unprofessional. When a respected voice like Ken Carman calls out a colleague this directly and this forcefully, it carries real weight. This isn't clickbait drama or petty media beef. This is a seasoned broadcaster saying, no, this isn't okay. And that's why the situation blew up the way it did. It signals that Lloyd's behavior reached a point where it couldn't just be brushed off as normal sports debate anymore. This wasn't hot take culture doing its thing. This was someone publicly advocating for a player's removal without football-based justification. And Carman didn't stop there, not even close. He took it a step further and said something that made people sit up straight. He declared that Jason Lloyd has lost his mind when it comes to Shedeur Sanders, because the dislike has gone too far. That's a heavy statement, and Carman knew exactly what he was saying. What Carman is really pointing out is that Lloyd's judgment appears to be compromised. That personal frustration, both with Shedeur and with the reaction from his supporters, has clouded his ability to be rational and objective. When analysis stops making football sense, people notice. This isn't about serving fans. This isn't about contributing anything productive to the Cleveland Browns conversation. This kind of commentary doesn't help the team, doesn't help the audience, and doesn't help the integrity of coverage. Calling for a player to be cut isn't harmless talk. It's a serious statement with real implications. And when that statement isn't backed by locker room issues, performance failure, or character concerns, it becomes reckless. That's the heart of Carman's argument. Shedeur Sanders hasn't divided the locker room. He hasn't caused problems. He hasn't embarrassed the organization. He hasn't failed when given opportunities. So when criticism keeps escalating anyway, people are going to question the motive. And that's exactly why this moment matters so much in Cleveland sports media. Because once analysis becomes personal, it stops being analysis altogether. And when that happens, fans aren't just allowed to push back. They're right to. At the end of the day, Ken Carman isn't defending Shedeur Sanders blindly. He's defending standards. Standards for fair coverage. This entire situation raises serious and unavoidable questions about the role of media members who cover professional sports teams, and Browns fans are paying close attention. This isn't just about one take or one radio segment anymore. It's about standards, responsibility, and where the line is supposed to be drawn. What is the difference between fair criticism and targeting? When does analysis stop being analysis and turn into something personal? How much should a media personality's emotions, frustrations, or personal feelings influence what they say publicly? And maybe most importantly, what responsibility do media members actually have to the fans and to the players they cover? Ken Carman is arguing that Jason Lloyd has failed every single one of those tests. According to Carman, Lloyd allowed personal bias to completely override professional obligation. Instead of staying grounded in football logic, performance trends, and real evaluation, the commentary drifted into emotional territory that no longer served the audience. Carman believes the clearest evidence of that breakdown is Lloyd's call for the Browns to cut Shedeur Sanders. That statement didn't come from a place of roster construction, locker room issues, or on-field failure. It came from frustration. And once commentary reaches that point, it stops being journalism and starts becoming something else entirely. That's why this moment matters so much to the Browns fan base. Fans aren't just reacting emotionally, they're thinking critically about how their team is covered and who controls the narrative. They're questioning whether certain voices are still acting in good faith or simply pushing personal agendas. This situation speaks to larger concerns about how players are treated, especially young quarterbacks trying to develop in high-pressure environments. It also raises concerns about who gets to influence public perception and how quickly a narrative can shift from evaluation to condemnation. Browns fans have made one thing abundantly clear. They're not passive observers in this anymore. They're engaged, they're vocal, and they're paying attention to how commentary shapes the broader conversation around the franchise. And in this case, many believe a line was crossed. That's why so many fans are backing Ken Carman's stance so strongly. They see his comments not as blind defense of a player, but as a defense of fairness, context, and professional integrity. Carman isn't saying players shouldn't be criticized. He's saying criticism has to be rooted in reality, not resentment. From the fan perspective, calling out behavior like this isn't about silencing opinions. It's about demanding better ones. Browns supporters want analysis that challenges players without dehumanizing them and debates that elevate the conversation instead of dragging it into personal territory. And that's why this debate has struck such a nerve in Cleveland. It's not just about Jason Lloyd or Shedeur Sanders anymore. It's about accountability in sports media. It's about recognizing when commentary stops helping fans understand the game and starts fueling unnecessary division. The fan base has spoken and their stance is clear. They believe Jason Lloyd went too far, crossed a professional boundary, and deserved to be called out for it. And by backing Ken Carman, they're also backing a larger message that sports coverage should challenge, inform, and respect the game, the players, and the fans who live and breathe this team every single week. This isn't noise. This is Cleveland demanding better conversations about their Browns, and they're not backing down.